Urban fantasy is kind of an interesting genre if you think about it, because it's kind of a bit of an oxymoron. Most fantasy or sci-fi stories tend to walk off the premise of it being a completely new world, whether in distant future, distant past, or completely made up. So for one to set a story set in basically our world, but the supernatural, the high tech is hidden in the background, is kind of interesting if you think about it. Now, a lot of stories could arguably count in this category of urban fantasy or modern supernatural horror or whatever you want to call it. It's quite a big genre, but I'm focusing on one which I will vaguely define as being the normal world does not generally know about the supernatural in any significant capacity, and that it's mostly a hidden world. So, most superhero stories wouldn't fit into it, for example, although you could make an argument for some, which I might use as an example later. However, how to write, I don't think it's quite as simple as you have the normal world and the supernatural world. No. In my opinion, when thinking about how to write a story set in one of these kinds of worlds, I think you have to think about the three worlds, as I'm going to call it, three spheres of interactiveness with it. Now, this might sound a bit weird, but hear me out. Now, to be one, not all urban fantasy type stories is going to fall into what I'm premising here, because fundamentally some version of it aren't as focused on the duality nature of the different storyline, the juxtaposition between the normal and the supernatural. Some stories just happen to be supernatural stories set place in the modern day, and the modern world doesn't know about it, but it's not really a big deal. Once again, it's kind of like that. So I'm only focusing on stories where that is a big driving element. I'm thinking, you need to think like modern supernatural TV for what I'm trying to get at here. Now, what I define as supernatural could be anything from vampires, werewolves, aliens, Timbuktu, Attack of the Mutant Ants. It doesn't really matter. It just has to be something vaguely supernatural or outside the normal world that exists hiddenly from our world. How much control they have of our world is completely not important. But now, what are these three worlds I'm talking about? Well, the three worlds I'm referring to is a theory I have of the different subjects that one of these kind of stories will follow. Now, I will go into them what I consider as in good order. The first world is the mundane world. The mundane world is literally our world. It is just our world, with all of our normal ups and downs, life problems, hazards, difficulty of life, and the mild inconveniences, and the great joys and small joys one gets in their existence. I would explain it, but you're already all here. And it's a pretty simple premise. Usually our protagonist will start in this world before being violently shoved into the other ones. It's classic trope 101. You're just a normal guy, and then, oh no, the vampire bites you, and now you're part of the vampire society, and now everyone looks like they came out of a goth emo convention for some reason. Has anyone explained that to me? But that's not the point. The point is pretty simple stuff. The second world is kind of the nature of the supernatural in question. Now, this can get a bit difficult to explain, especially since most stories will relatively quickly fall into kitchen sink mentality of everything's kind of real and kind of true. It's just like, if there's vampires, there's like a 95% chance werewolves also exist. And if there's werewolves and vampires, then Frankenstein's monster's probably right over there. So, just accept that. But this is more the main premise of it. Like, if you come in here, wanting to see a story about aliens hiding in the modern day, then this is kind of like the draw, the power fantasy behind it, but also the mundane aspects one would have to go through. Like, you discover you're an alien, but now you have to watch your back from alien hunters or ancient alien conspirators, but you also get to do stuff like telekinesis. So, it's pretty even trade. And you got some sci-fi lasers, that's nice too. It's kind of the mundane elements. This will make up a lot of the mundane, and the second world will kind of make up the bulk of the story. I remember that as the bulk of the everyday episodes. The casual arcs. The third world is kind of more tied to the second one, but is still its own thing. What I like to call the Antagonist. This one is generally the big bad, the big kahuna of the arc, season, storyline, or even the entire show. It's the antagonistic force that our heroes and protagonists must fight against. It's like, oh no, we have to stop the elder vampire or he's gonna take over the world or whatever. Or, oh no, the aliens are gonna come and destroy the earth if we don't find a way to send them back or whatever. This is kind of like the main antagonist, like I said. It's the big draw, the plot of the show. Not generally the reason you come to see the show, but what keeps the plot going forward. Now, these three spheres or worlds of supernatural is the urban, urban, fantasy, that kind of thing, all nice and fine, dandy, and known, but it's the intersections that make them unique, in my opinion. Like this diagram I've been showing you this whole time, it's not so much about the individual things, but how they interact with the others that truly make it a classic, in my opinion, urban fantasy type show or story. Because you could truly run a story without using this model, or even something that could even vaguely be applied to this model, and that doesn't mean it's a bad show, it just means it doesn't feel, at least in my opinion, how urban fantasy, that kind of hidden supernatural works. And it's about the intersections, in my opinion, here, of where these all kind of intersect. Like, I think a weird example I'm going to go with that isn't immediately come to mind, but I think it's true, is Gravity Falls kind of falls into this genre as well to some degree. At least that's my personal opinion. Now, of course, you're free to agree or disagree as you will, but I think it's an interesting way to look at how to write and do urban fantasy type stories. Urban fantasy, supernatural stories, and it's just an idea I had, and it's probably we need some ironing and getting the kinks out, but I would love to see your thoughts on it. Comment down below what you think of this model and how you would rate certain shows on it, or consider it. Just my opinion. But I'll see you next time. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscriber. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.